of work, I didn't exactly know how he was going to sound. And I had just I had been thinking about it and hoping that something would come.
He was once Hollywood's first black superhero. Some would even argue he literally built the path Marvel would later walk on. His name is Wesley Snipes, and his story runs deeper than what many people know. At a point in his career, Wesley Snipes was at the top of the world. He was the face of a billion-dollar franchise, a martial arts icon, and one of the most bankable stars of the 90s. But just a few years later, something happened that brought everything crashing down. What really happened to Wesley Snipes? Let's dive into the details. What really happened to Wesley Snipes? For years, people speculated about what really happened to Wesley Snipes. His life took one of the most shocking turns in Hollywood. He went from walking red carpets to walking into a prison cell. How did the same man who revived Marvel long before Iron Man ever existed suddenly vanished from Hollywood's spotlight? His life changed completely overnight, from earning millions to fighting to save his career and reputation. Many wondered how a man who once seemed unstoppable could lose everything so fast. There have been various theories. Some claimed he became arrogant, while some say he was betrayed by a system that has always wanted to bring him down. However, recently, a new wave of discoveries has shed light on what truly went wrong. What we are about to uncover will have you totally shocked. You won't see it coming. The origin of Wesley Snipes' trouble can be traced back to when Blade Trinity hit theaters in 2004. Many of his fans had expected it to be another moment of triumph for box office. Instead, it marked the beginning of Wesley Snipes' downfall. Behind the scenes, the production had been all forms of chaos you could imagine. There were creative clashes and on-set tension. This was when the rumors had begun that Wesley had become more difficult
And they have the trailers lined up, and there's some days when all of the guys
to work with. When the movie finally premiered, critics were merciless. The same man who once carried an entire franchise was suddenly portrayed as the problem. As the dust settled, the calls from major studios stopped coming. Directors, who once praised his discipline, now avoided his name. Hollywood had a new generation of stars, and Wesley wasn't part of it. One by one, the opportunities vanished. Roles that once went to Snipes were now being offered to others. For fans who remembered his rise, it was painful to watch. The man who once defined cool had been labeled a fallen star, but what he didn't realize was that his troubles had just begun. The next phase of his dilemma started quietly. There were whispers about unpaid taxes, nothing too serious. But soon enough, those whispers turned into headlines. Wesley Snipes, the once untouchable star of Blade, had found himself in a battle unlike anything he'd ever faced. Only this time, the enemy wasn't on screen. It was the United States government. During the height of his fame, Wesley had become entangled with a group of tax protesters who believed that most Americans weren't legally required to pay federal income taxes. They called it the Section 861 argument. To them, the law was a loophole, and Wesley, trusting the wrong people, believed it. From 1999 to 2004, he stopped filing his tax returns entirely, convinced that he was exempt. But the IRS didn't see it that way.
You gonna teach your man to talk. All right, man. He's all right. You only say that because you're on his payroll.
In 2006, a federal grand jury indicted Snipes on multiple counts of tax fraud and conspiracy. The headlines were brutal. It read, "Blade versus the IRS, from action hero to accused felon," and others like that. The trial began in early 2008 in Ocala, Florida. It was one of the most watched celebrity court cases of the decade. The defense argued that Snipes had been misled by bad advice, that he was simply a victim of manipulative tax gurus who exploited his trust. But the prosecution painted a different picture. To them, Wesley Snipes wasn't a victim. They described him as a man who knew his obligations and deliberately ignored them. After weeks of testimony and cross-examination, the verdict came in. Snipes was acquitted of the most serious felony charges, conspiracy and tax fraud. But the jury found him guilty on 3 misdemeanor counts of failing to file tax returns for the years 1999 through 2001. The sentence was 3 years in federal prison. The media erupted. Overnight, the story was everywhere. The media called it From Hollywood Red Carpet to Federal Prison. It was a stunning fall for a man once at the top of the entertainment world. But what his life was in prison was even worse. In December 2010, Wesley Snipes reported to McKean Federal Prison in Pennsylvania to begin serving his 3-year sentence. For a man who had once lived under the bright lights of Hollywood,
matter of fact, at the time when I did Wildcats, I was living in one of the most crack-infested blocks.
the silence of prison life was deafening. Gone were the red carpets and camera flashes. In their place stood gray walls, narrow corridors, and long hours of reflection. Inside, Wesley withdrew from the noise of the outside world. He rarely spoke to the press, never sought sympathy. Instead, he chose to turn inward. Days were spent reading, meditating, and practicing martial arts. The same discipline that once defined his on-screen strength now became his tool for survival. Fellow inmates described him as calm, focused, and surprisingly humble. He kept to himself, maintaining the same physical and mental rigor that had shaped his earlier years, but with a new purpose: to endure, to understand, and to rebuild. Prison stripped away the celebrity, leaving only the man. And in that stillness, Wesley began to find clarity. He reflected on the choices that led him there, on the people he had trusted, and on the fragile nature of fame. When he walked out of McKean in April 2013, he was no longer the invincible star who once ruled the box office. He was quieter, more grounded. Reporters asked how he felt after 3 years behind bars, and he answered simply, "It's been a hell of a journey." However, at this point in his life, he had no idea things were still going to get much worse. No one could think it would get so bad. Wesley Snipes' financial ruin. Freedom was supposed to mean a fresh start, but for Wesley Snipes, life after prison brought a different kind of confinement. It brought one defined by debt, loss, and the wreckage of a once massive fortune. His mansion in Alpine, New Jersey, once a gleaming symbol of success, became a haunting reminder of everything he had lost. The $5.6 million estate, perched on lush grounds and surrounded by towering gates, had once hosted Hollywood's elite. But by 2014, the laughter had faded. Auction notices appeared on the gates, and the home that once represented triumph was now a burden too heavy to carry. The IRS wasn't done with him. They came calling again, this time not as prosecutors, but as collectors. Their calculations were staggering. Between unpaid taxes, interest, and penalties, Wesley's debt had swelled to an estimated $23.5 million.
I thought you said you didn't do this shit anymore. I thought you said you were a man of God.
I've always.
He tried to negotiate, offering a settlement of $842,000, a fraction of what he owed. But the IRS rejected it outright. Court battles followed, dragging on for years, as his financial troubles played out in public view. Eventually, the figure was reduced to about $9.5 million. But the damage had already been done. Everything he'd built, decades of blockbuster paychecks, endorsements, and fame, had evaporated. The man who once earned more than $40 million from his films now found himself struggling to hold on to what little remained. The contrast was heartbreaking. Once photographed beside luxury cars and movie co-stars, he was now pictured beside lawyers and court clerks. The extravagance of the past stood in sharp relief against the austerity of the present. Hollywood had moved on, and so had the money.
Just your standard professional assault on an agency safe house in the middle of the day.
His name, once synonymous with success, became a cautionary reference in finance and entertainment circles alike. He had earned over $40 million, and yet owed more than he owned. For Wesley Snipes, the real tragedy wasn't just the loss of wealth, it was watching a lifetime of work, fame, and pride dissolve into debt. And yet, even in that ruin, a small spark remained, the same one that had fueled every comeback before. For most people, a fall like Wesley Snipes's would have marked the end. But if prison had stripped him of his pride, it hadn't taken his purpose. Deep down, the fighter in him was still alive, waiting for a chance to step back into the light. That moment came in 2014, when The Expendables 3 hit theaters. It was his first major film role after years away, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. Early in the movie, his character's asked, "Why did they lock you up?" He smirks and replies, "Tax evasion." The audience roared. In that single line, Snipes turned his own humiliation into humor, reclaiming control of the narrative that had nearly destroyed him. The comeback had begun, but he was done yet. In 2021, he reminded the world just how versatile he was. Playing General Izzy in Coming to America, Snipes stole every scene with his sharp comedic timing and flamboyant charm. It was a different side of him, playful, confident, and completely self-aware. For many fans, it was the first time they'd seen him laugh on screen rather than fight. For Wesley, it was proof that he could still reinvent himself, that he wasn't defined by his past mistakes. Then came 2024, and with it, the moment no one expected, a surprise cameo as Blade in Deadpool and Wolverine. When he appeared on screen, the IMAX crowd erupted. It was more than nostalgia, it was redemption. The man who had once built the foundation for Marvel's cinematic empire was finally being honored in front of a new generation. Even Ryan Reynolds joined in, calling him Marvel Daddy. It was a public acknowledgement to the man who made superheroes cool long before capes and crossovers ruled the box office. That same year, Snipes earned a spot in the Guinness World Records for the longest gap between two portrayals of the same Marvel hero. Reflecting on the moment, he humbly spoke about how he thought he had lost it all, and he just had to move on. But then Ryan reached out, and here we are. After years of silence, scandal, and survival, Wesley Snipes had done the impossible. He had turned disgrace into grace, failure into legacy. His comeback wasn't just about fame. It was about reclaiming his story on his own terms, one last time. Looking at his story, Wesley Snipes showed a kind of go-getter spirit that he had always exhibited from his childhood. Some of the details about his childhood will surprise you even more. Wesley Snipes' childhood. Wesley Snipes did not arrive fully formed under Hollywood lights. He was shaped by movement, family responsibility, and a hunger to perform that surfaced early and refused to quiet down. Born into a working-class household in the early 1960s, his earliest years were defined less by celebrity and more by family rhythms, tight budgets, and the small rebellions of a boy who loved to move and to be seen. He grew up with siblings and extended family who helped raise him. The family network kept him grounded even as the world around them sometimes felt unstable. As a child and teenager, he was drawn to performance in a way that looked less like a hobby and more like destiny. He spent hours rehearsing scenes and routines. That drive pushed him into community theater productions and school plays, where teachers and classmates began to notice how natural he was in front of an audience. Those early performances gave him his first taste of applause and the conviction that acting wasn't a pastime. It might one day be a way out. Schooling for Wesley wasn't a single straight line. He moved between neighborhoods and schools as his family navigated economic and personal shifts. He attended under-resourced public schools where the everyday realities of city life. There were crowded classrooms, limited resources, and the pressure of neighborhood survival. All these made ambition feel both urgent and precarious. Still, he found mentors among teachers and arts instructors who recognized his focus and pushed him toward formal training. Those early mentors introduced him to more disciplined study and to peers who took drama and movement seriously. Outside of the classroom, he nurtured a fierce physical discipline. Over time, he accumulated training in a variety of systems that would later inform his physicality on screen. But critically, for his childhood and adolescence, the practice was a refuge, a place where repetition, respect for form, and physical challenge met the emotional release he needed. That rigorous relationship with physical training shaped both his presence and his confidence. Wesley's teenage years also included important cultural and spiritual searching. As a young man, he explored belief and identity in ways many of his peers did not. Faith, history, and personal dignity became part of his internal architecture. He later described how that period helped him frame his sense of worth and purpose. crucial fuel for a young black performer navigating mostly white cultural institutions and an industry with very narrow ideas about which black men could be leading men. Those formative questions about identity would later echo in the choices he made on stage and on screen. Academically and artistically, a turning point came when he pursued formal arts education. He pressed into conservatory-style study that balanced technique with creative risk. This time in stage training taught him the craft of acting, the discipline of voice work, the subtleties of scene study, and an appreciation for ensemble work. All of these would later underpin his ability to move between drama, action, and comedy. Teachers who witnessed his early intensity said he approached every assignment with the seriousness of someone already living his art. Another critical influence was community and peer networks. Friends, local artists, and early mentors provided both opportunities and hard truths. One mentor in particular, a fighter and trainer who worked with him during his New York period, helped him take raw athleticism and channel it into trained performative movement. That relationship refined his martial skill set into something theatrical. Fights became choreography and physical storytelling, rather than unstructured aggression. Those lessons made him safer on camera and gave him a credible kinetic presence that casting directors would later notice. By his early 20s, the pieces were in place. Sustained stage training, a disciplined physical practice, mentors who respected his work ethic, and the practical tenacity to market himself. He performed in competitions and local showcases, where an agent or casting director might be watching. It was at one of those moments, when the right person happened to be in the room, that the pathway to professional work opened. He didn't arrive overnight. He had built the technical chops, the emotional depth, and the physical credibility that made his transition into film and television not only possible, but convincing. His first taste of the big screen came in 1986, in the sports comedy Wildcats, starring Goldie Hawn. It wasn't a leading role, but Snipes' athletic grace and sharp delivery stood out. To most audiences, he was just another fresh face. To casting directors, he was someone to remember. Then, in 1987, fate came calling in the form of the king of pop himself. Michael Jackson's music video for Bad, directed by Martin Scorsese, needed a rival, someone who could match Jackson's energy, stare him down, and command the frame. Snipes landed the role, and in just a few minutes of screen time, he became the guy everyone wanted to know. The world asked, "Who is that?" And Hollywood took notice. That short film became a cultural moment that introduced Wesley Snipes to a global audience. Suddenly, he was on the radar of major producers and directors looking for someone who could blend toughness with charisma, intensity with intelligence. By 1991, Snipes landed the role that would define the next phase of his career, Nino Brown in New Jack City. It was a crime drama that pulsed with the energy of a changing America, gritty, stylish, and unapologetically bold. Snipes didn't just play Nino Brown, he became him. Ruthless, charming, terrifyingly human. The film, made on a modest $8 million budget, went on to gross over $47 million, turning Snipes into a box office draw and a symbol of a new kind of black masculinity on screen. Critics hailed his performance as electrifying. Wesley Snipes was no longer just an actor. He was a force, the man who redefined what it meant to be a black star in Hollywood. From there, the doors swung open. The 1990s weren't just Wesley Snipes' decade. They were his empire. The kid who once dreamed of Broadway had become one of Hollywood's most bankable action stars, commanding both the screen and the box office with unmatched swagger and skill. His breakout into full-fledged stardom came in 1992 with Passenger 57. Playing airline security expert John Cutter, Snipes delivered the kind of cool confidence that defined an era. One line from the film became legendary: "Always bet on black." He followed it up with Demolition Man in 1993, going head-to-head with Sylvester Stallone in a futuristic battle of chaos versus control. As Simon Phoenix, Snipes played the villain with electric unpredictability, a neon-haired, gleeful embodiment of mayhem. The film pulled in over $159 million worldwide. By the mid-1990s, he was earning between $7 to $10 million per film. He wasn't confined to explosions and fight scenes either. His dramatic turn in One Night Stand in 1997 earned him the Best Actor award at the Venice Film Festival, a rare honor for an American action star and proof of his range. Then came his defining legacy, Blade, in 1998. With its mix of martial arts, horror, and comic book lore, Snipes created something the world had never seen before, a black superhero leading a blockbuster franchise. Blade transformed a $45 million budget into a $131 million global hit, reviving Marvel's dying reputation and setting the stage for the superhero era to come. The sequels only solidified his dominance. Blade 2, released in 2002, grossed $155 million. For many fans and critics alike, the verdict was clear. Without Blade, there would be no MCU. Wesley Snipes had paved the way. His performance and presence proved that superhero films could be dark, stylish, and wildly successful. By the early 2000s, Wesley Snipes was untouchable. But as the lights burned brightest, shadows began to creep in. At the height of power, the darkness began to grow. There is a side of Wesley Snipes many people don't know. Behind the martial arts precision and movie star bravado, Wesley Snipes has always been a family man, deeply protective, quietly emotional, and guided by love even in his darkest moments. His first marriage was to April Dubois in 1985, long before fame and fortune came calling. The young couple shared big dreams and small beginnings, raising their son, Jelani Asar Snipes, who would later make a brief appearance in his father's 1990 film, Mo Better Blues. But as Wesley's career took off, the constant travel, long hours, and growing demands of Hollywood strained their relationship. They eventually divorced in 1990, parting with just as Wesley was entering the most successful chapter of his career. Years later, he found love again, this time in a place far removed from the glare of Hollywood. He met Nakyoung Nikki Park, a Korean painter and artist whose quiet strength would become his anchor. The two married in 2003, building a life together marked by deep loyalty and resilience. Nikki would later stand by Wesley through the storm that nearly destroyed him, his trial, conviction, and years in prison. While the world turned its back, she remained steadfast, raising their 4 children and holding the family together. During his trial, Snipes gave a heartbreaking plea to delay his prison sentence, saying softly, "How do I explain to my kids where I'm going?" It was a moment that stripped away the celebrity and left only the man, a father who feared losing precious time with his children. When he was finally released, in 2013, he spoke reflectively of how the biggest lesson he had learned was time. There was no way he could get back the lost years. This deepened his appreciation for family, for second chances, and for the quiet beauty of everyday moments. In 2021, when his children made cameo appearances alongside him in Coming to America, it was a full-circle moment of rebirth, redemption, and unity. Wesley Snipes had once been the ultimate action hero on screen, but off-screen, his greatest fight was for love, family, and forgiveness. What's your take on the court drama between Wesley Snipes and the IRS that led to his eventual prison time? Do you think he made good of his career, especially after he returned from jail? We would love you to share your opinion in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.